Hello, everybody. Today we have our guest, Michael Fritz. Michael is actually a founder of Arch DevOps. He actually has a podcast with Arch DevOps and has been in the quality assurance automation field for 12 plus years. Has helped a lot of businesses kind of improve their automation and set up the automation, and is an entrepreneur himself. So we are really excited to get to know you a little bit more, Michael, and what you do and about testing. And we're really interested in geeking out on the testing topics. But go ahead. You had a laugh about your name.
I did.
Let everybody know.
I'm like, you're not going to try the last name. That's all right. That's cool. That's why I go by Fritz. It's hard for people to say Fritzius.
All right.
So
Fritzius.
there we
Fritzius,
go.
right?
You
All
got
right.
it. I don't know what you were worried about. You did great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so a question that you on YouTube will be like, oh, like that looks like a studio, that looks like a space suite. What is there? So, Michael, I was fascinated by the story on how you converted, and created your studio there. So, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's literally a truck. It's a Ford F-150. It's old. It gets me where I need to go. But I started doing my podcast out here because I had a few of my earlier episodes. Um, and in the house, I've got four little girls that love screaming and banging on the piano and clanging pots and pans and
Yes.
also screaming. Right? I mentioned that, but I'm like, I am not spending a week editing all that out of an episode. There's no way. I need a quiet place. And I'm like, oh, I could use the truck. It's right out there and it's right in range of Wi-Fi. So it's great. I mean, it's quiet. I get out here and guests are like, are you in a studio? I'm like, no, I'm in a truck. And they're like,
I mean, you
what?
sound like you're in a studio.
Yeah,
Uh,
it really works really, really well. Every once in a while, the girls will like bang on the windows and I'm like, go on mute. And I'm like, stop it. I'm on a show. Yeah. Tell me more about that. And
yeah, and usually you do an audio show, so you could do that. But hey, today is different. Today we might just actually have to add some more fun to the podcast if that happens.
yep, very true. I've let them know. I'm like, listen, Daddy's going to be a guest on a podcast, right? So don't
Yes.
don't do crazy things.
Yes. um so, and the other thing I have to thank you, you're in St. Louis and it's not a warm place right now, and you're in the truck, you've got a jacket on. Are you like, you're good, right?
I'm
You feel,
good. I
yeah.
mean, I can still feel most of my fingers. I
Yeah.
should be good. I'm good.
All right. For the listeners, just know that for Michael to do this podcast, he had to spend an hour outside in the truck doing this. So hopefully you really appreciate this. And we're gonna talk about a lot of very interesting stuff here today.
Yep.
So okay, well, let's jump into our topics. You are a testing and automation guru, Michael.
Hmm.
So why don't you let the audience know, and then the audience is usually people who are fairly new to testing. So what is testing?
Well, testing is when you have a general idea of what's supposed to happen. If you take some actions on anything, and we're not even talking about software, we're just talking in general.
Hmm.
You perform some kind of action, you expect some kind of result, but you're not sure. Maybe something else will happen. So let's try it and see what happens. That's a test.
Hmm.
When it comes to software, same kind of thing. You interact, you use the software in a certain way, and you think you're going to get a certain result. And well, there's only one way to find out. You got to just do the thing and see if you got the expected result. And if it doesn't do what you thought it was supposed to do, maybe you found a bug or maybe you misunderstood the software. But either way, there's some good data to be gleaned from that activity. So that's the nature of testing when it comes to software.
Nice. Um, so let's just go into the goal of testing, and let's just make it a little bit more real, maybe with an example, maybe a softer example. So what would you say is a goal of testing?
Goal of testing is to make sure that the customer is going to be happy with the results. It's not to make sure that your software works like perfectly, like, oh my goodness, there's nothing wrong with this at all, right? It's like, okay, does it keep the customer happy? Does it get them what they want? And I think that's where a lot of testing efforts seem to really fall down, or they get kind of really complex. They're focused on the wrong thing. The
Mm,
focus is never the software itself. The focus is customer satisfaction.
got
So
you.
that's the goal of testing.
Yeah, and then in kind of to use like an example of Zoom, for example, we're both on Zoom platform. When if we were to make it real, software teams are pretty much building out the application, so they have a specific intent on how the users will use it. So you're saying that testing is there to ensure that, okay, when you and me, who are the end users, we are using it, it actually works the way that they intended, or works the way in a way with it solves our problem, which is to like be on camera, talk to each other, being able to be on mute, like all that stuff, right?
Mhm. Right. But to go back to what it was before, right? Like, it's the focus should still be the customer. Like we can put on the developer hat and say, hey, we're gonna pretend we work at Zoom, right?
Mm,
And when we go in and test, then if we're not testing with the customer in mind, we may end up doing too much testing or testing the wrong thing.
yeah,
So that's why I always, and I hammer on this a lot with people, right? It's like, focus on the customer, think about the customer, put yourself in their shoes,
yeah.
and what do they want? And then make sure that the software meets their expectations.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, our audience, are folks who are kind of learning software development for the first time. So they might not even know what you're talking about. Oh, why? It sounds like such a simple thing. You're building the product for a customer. You should be thinking, why is it, why do you have to hammer that into people's mind? Is there an evidence where people don't think about it? Like, make it real for people, what it's like to be in the software world.
Oh my goodness. It's amazing being in the software world. There's something really special about being able to take what's essentially a rock and tricking it into thinking by using electricity. Talking about a computer, it's silicon, and you're like cajoling it into doing cool things. There's something really neat about that. But
Yeah.
human nature being what it is, it's very, very easy to let that get in your head and be amazed at how awesome you are and how godlike the power is. You're laughing, but I know I'm
Yeah.
speaking the truth, man. But that is exactly what happens. And then we get so lost in the details of, look at all this cool stuff I did, that we lose track of, how are we helping the customer? How are we improving their day to day? How are we serving the people around us? And I can say that I'm not some ivory tower nerd. I have been there. I have written hideous code and really complex stuff that I cringe at thinking that anybody's even using it now. Oh my goodness. I used to write code I didn't do any testing at all. Can you believe that? Like, this
Yeah.
is going into like devices that are meant to save people's lives. And I hope to God they're not using it, but you know,
All right. So you're saying
yeah,
that it's not just you. There's other people who do that too. Um,
yeah.
and you've seen that a few times.
I have. Well, judging by your laughing, I mean, I think it's you, man. You've done
Yeah.
it too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know.
I've done it.
So it's at least two of us on this whole planet have been doing this kind of thing. But it really does happen a lot, right? Because there's a mental thing, there's ego, there's pride, there's all kinds of cool things. We do cool stuff, but we got to take a step back and say, okay, we're here to help the customer. So
Yeah. No, I love that. Kind of bringing that to the customer. We're building, even though we could do, build amazing things and we have all the power from the back end, we can do cool things. Hey, let's just focus on the customer.
right,
And, tying it back to the testing concept, just like, are we solving customers' problem? Are they happy when they're using the software?
right.
So, and then we introduce the concept of bugs. Bugs are entities that come in where if certain piece of software is not working accordingly how it should work, we are calling that a bug.
Yes. Well, it's not working how we think it should work. So either it really is a bug in the system and it was developed wrong, or sometimes it's we have a misunderstanding of what the software was supposed to do.
Mm.
If somebody tells you, hey, the software should do X, and you hear what they say, and in your mind, you think, okay, I get it. The software should do Y. And then you
Mm.
look at it, and then it's like, hey, X doesn't equal Y. Well, you misunderstood what they said. And it happens all the time. It's not cut and dry like that. I mean, people throw jargon around and they use big words, and it's easy to get lost in the mix. But yeah, just as long as you're detecting when the software is not working according to what you think it's supposed to do, then it's either a bug or it's a communication challenge. We'll call it
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So Michael, let's just kind of build out a agile team. So let's say we have a team of anywhere from 4 to 9 people. Let's just say we have a team of 7 people. We've got 5 developers, somebody who's doing quality QA work, and then we've got a business analyst, right?
Right.
So let's take that scenario and let's make it real for our audience. Like in that team, what does a typical development cycle look like? When does the BA bring the requirements and communicate to the developer? And then when does the testing crew or tester gets involved? So from that point of view, let's just talk about the software testing phase. When does the conversation about software testing comes into the play of this agile team?
Do you mean agile when it's done right, or do you mean agile when companies are like, oh yeah, we're agile, but they're just everybody's moving frantically? Is it the first one?
Well, this let's just talk about the scenario where things are going right, or what companies or teams should be aspiring to do. Why should they aspire to do it correctly, and what's the benefit of that?
Got it. Well, in my humble professional opinion, the QA phase should really begin almost as soon as the development starts, if not like right away, then at least soon after it, not like 2 weeks after, but soon. And the reason for that is there's a lot of mindset differences between a software developer and a software tester. Testers are going to think of things that developers don't think about, and vice versa. The devs are going to think of things that QA doesn't think about. The only way to make sure that quality starts out of the gate is to involve quality earlier in the process. So the way that normally happens, like what happens at a lot of companies, is they'll say that, they'll pay lip service to it, right? And then they'll have the development phase, and then they'll throw it over to the testers, and then, well, we told you it was going to take 3 weeks to test this, and you gave us 7 hours. So we're a little bit strapped for time. But yeah, as soon as QA gets involved in that development process and they're able to offer insights so that the developers can implement it and prevent the bugs right there at the beginning, then it's much better. It's much better.
Yeah. And, quick question. You kind of shared a little bit more of a mindset of a tester in contrast to mindset of a developer. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the mindset of a tester? Like what is tester thinking? What's in their mind? What's their, their goal? Like what's their contribution to the team? Let's talk about that.
Sure thing. Well, there's a couple different aspects to it, and the one is the creator/destroyer mindset, right? So developers are creators in this case. They're crafting code, they're writing software. They're making something out of nothing. They're telling the computer, hey, I want you to do this. The tester, and it's not like violent destruction, right? But we're trying to find ways to make the system misbehave in a way that, oh, that's unexpected, right? So I think you mentioned before we hit the record button, it's like a hacker, right? We're trying to hack into the system in a good way. We're white hat hackers. We're not the bad guys, but we're going to find vulnerabilities in ways that the software doesn't work right because of the other reason, which is the focus. So your focal length, right? So developers tend to have a very, very tight focus on on what they're working on, which is good. It's not a bad thing. I mean, focus is an amazing thing. I've seen people that they get in the flow and they just zoop and they get in there and they just bang out stuff. And 8 hours later, they're like, oh my goodness, I haven't peed all day. And
They
look at
come
all
out of
this
the
code I wrote,
matrix.
right? Right, exactly. Testers have a longer focus, right? So like we're way out here and we may not have the details of, like, I know exactly what this code is supposed to do. I know exactly every line. I'm intimately familiar with it like a developer, but they understand more of the bigger picture. They understand, like, okay, here's something that is upstream of what this developer just wrote. And I don't think they know about this, but if it sends this kind of information into the system, that API that this developer just wrote is going to poop its pants, right?
Mm.
So not only are we trying to actively break the system in a way that makes sure that the customers are happy,
Mm-hmm.
but we also have a high level, like an abstract view of how the system is supposed to work all together.
Got you. So let's go into let's kind of follow up on that software testing phase and kind of go into like the idea of like how do you do the planning for testing? What do you test? What can you test? Like go into that topic.
Right. Well, start with identifying the things that you have control of. And what I mean by that is a lot of companies, they'll use a mix of third-party tools, GitHub modules, things they find online, code they've copied off a Stack Overflow. We all do it, don't lie. I know you listening, you do it too. And stuff that they've written there in-house, okay? The chances of a bug happening in a well-tested third-party library of some kind is very slim. People put that stuff out there because they want others to use it, so they're not going to just ship garbage. And if millions of people are using it every day, it's like that says something. So your test plan and your test strategy start with identifying just the things that you have direct control of, the code that you wrote.
Mm-hmm.
The chances of a bug being there are a lot higher. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it's sort of like a ripple effect. And I guess to use a word picture, next time you're at a lake or something and you decide, I'm going to throw this rock in there. When the rock hits the water, it's going to create a disturbance, obviously, but the disturbance is going to start right where the rock hit, and then it's going to radiate outward. Okay, it's a ripple effect.
Mm-hmm.
When you're getting ready to test a really complex system, a bunch of APIs and databases and websites, whatever, start with where the software was changed first. Okay. Little known fact, I'll share a trade secret with you, but when developers write code, when they write software, that's where bugs happen. Just between you and me, just between us girls, right?
Yeah.
We know that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, they're keeping us employed, so thank you for your service, Vivek. But start there. Identify the places, right, that are most likely to have a bug, and if you focus your test effort right there, and then when that, let's say it all passes, you run all your tests, okay, I didn't find any bugs, then start to test the things outside of that. And if that passes, then test the rest, everything else. That's a solid strategy. It's worked well for myself. It's worked well for a lot of companies who have found that just running in and just running through a list of tests, regardless, like we got 10,000 tests, run them all. And okay, that takes a while. And on test 7,403, we found a bug. And it's like, could have found that 2 weeks ago if you had just started testing in that area, because that's what was changed, right? So starting with that kind of ripple effect and focus your strategy in one place and radiate outward, it works wonders, works really well.
Yeah. So concept like pairwise testing, how should somebody think about that? Or can we do a little bit more deep dive on that?
How we can, yeah. I mean, I want to start a little bit with kind of defining what pairwise testing is first. I'm trying to think of a good example here. So let's say you've got okay, well, let's say you've got some kind of an order form of some kind. You can place an order for some kind of dingus. It comes in 3 colors, 5 sizes. You can get 1, 3, or 6 packs of them. You can get short, medium, long. Okay. And whatever it is, there's all these different types of categories that you can change. Now, what some people would do is they'd say, okay, well, I have to test every possible combination of this, and it can get big in a hurry. Okay. Now, realistically, what happens when real life bugs show up? They show up not because you ordered a long object or you ordered a 6 count of the object, but it happens because you ordered a 6 count of long objects. Okay. So if you instead focus on testing every possible pair of values, then you end up finding bugs a lot faster. And we listed off, I came up with these out of my head, right? Like, long, short, 1, 3, 6, whatever. But if you pick like one data set, like I'm ordering 1 long blue camera stand, whatever it is, there's actually 6 pairs in there. You've got 1 long, 1 blue, 1 camera stand, long blue. Okay. So you cover in that one test case, you cover 6 possible pairs, which means now going forward, you don't have to run any more tests that contain those particular pairs. And then you notice that it drastically cuts down the number of possible test cases. I have seen examples of this where there would be upwards of 16 million with an M possible test cases, and it reduced it down to about 30 or 40 test cases, and you get good test coverage off of that. If you're gonna find a bug, wow, indeed. And it's sort of a scary thing, talking to companies about that, because they're like, oh, but what about the coverage? And it's like, well, what are you covering with all these bajillions of test cases? Like, it's taking you this long to run these tests and you're still releasing bugs. So what do you have to lose, right? So, but statistics and math are on your side. And and you don't have to stick with just pairwise. I mean, they call it that because there's every possible 2 set or tuple, whatever you want to call it. You can pick every possible set of 3, 4, 5 parameters. You can get combinations. You'll get more test cases that way. But if you really want that good warm fuzzy, you can go higher. Yeah.
So just to try to change gear and kind of get you bring some more real life scenarios, I'm going to throw this question out. So,
all right,
based on what we talked about, as a quality and automation person, what drives you crazy in a software development? What when you see this drives me crazy?
I have to say it's fear. I have to say it's fear. And I cannot tell you how many times I've come into a company and they're like, we need test automation. We need a QA process. We need this, we need that. And I'm looking around and people are not talking. They're not making eye contact. They're very fear driven. It's kind of a backbiting culture. People are always looking out for themselves. And it's like, okay, now I have learned from experience that yes, you can put test automation, you can build an entire framework from scratch and train people on how to use it. And they can say, all right, yeah, go Fritz. And then they won't use it because they're afraid to take risk and try new things and experiment. So fear drives me crazy, but in a good way, because I know that that's a problem I can help fix. That's like the bigger part of what I do. It's weird. The longer I'm in this space, the more I'm more getting in people's heads and doing like
Yeah.
psychiatry than I am actually writing code. It's amazing. It's
Well,
weird.
that's good. You're again, like I complimented you earlier. You're having empathy for your customer, and you're like understanding what's their fear, and then you're trying to solve that problem, which is probably the reason why you're so successful at what you do.
Maybe, I will take that. I'm going to take that as a compliment.
Yes,
That must be the reason.
take it.
I'm a good smooth talker.
And you try to understand where people are at, their
Right.
fears, their needs, their challenges, all that, right? So
Right. Yeah.
your customers are very emotional beings, and they probably need to be heard and need to know that you understand them before they kind of bring you on as a leader to kind of automate certain parts.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So the next question that we have here is around testing. Um, what what else? So let's say test plans. Let's just talk about test plans. How do you think about it? How do you let's talk about different modules and kind of help us make this idea real of how to create a test plan and how to do that planning.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with the assumption that people are communicating well. Okay. So we're talking about a culture where fear is at a minimum. People are willing to ask questions without fear of looking stupid for having
Mm,
asked. Like, I don't know. There's places that are like that, right? They're out there. Um, and everybody has at least a decent understanding of how the software works. Okay. These are wild assumptions, and this sounds like an ideal, but let's start with there. We'll talk about what it looks like when it's done right. Okay.
mm-hmm,
A test plan will be exactly detailed enough
mm-hmm,
so that the person writing the test plan can hand that test plan to another tester and have the tests executed exactly as written. Okay.
mm,
Now, I want to say as detailed as necessary, exactly only as much detail as what's needed.
mm-hmm.
Because if you swing too far one way and you say customers should be able to create a record, it's like, what kind of record?
Mm,
Well, this kind of record. Okay. Well, why the heck didn't you say it in the test plan, fam? Like I'm trying, you want to prevent those rework loops, right? You want to keep them from
yeah.
going back and forth. Now you swing the other way and you get some people that are like, well, it's got to be detailed enough that somebody coming in off the street will
Mm,
be able to run the test case. And it's like, that sounds really good in theory, but are you actually hiring people off the street?
mm.
Like, are you actually, like, I know it sounds funny and I know it may seem like to really help readability, but
Yeah.
what ends up happening is people are looking at this and they're like, I am not going to sit here and type, like, make 75 test cases with, given I open a browser and I click the username button and I type this username and I'm not going to do that. And then they're going to copy paste. We all do it again. I'm sharing all these dirty secrets about software development. I graduated from Control C, Control V University, just like the rest of you.
Yes.
Um, but they're going to copy paste and then they're going to end up fat fingering some detail. They're going to miss it. And then it's going to be a faulty test plan. And then
Mm,
what's going to happen is, oh my goodness, my test didn't pass. And it's like, actually, you don't have the right test.
yeah.
You copied it from test number 63 or whatever, and it's not supposed to do that. That's another rework loop. So always go in with the assumption that you're working with smart people, because you probably are,
Mm-hmm.
and respect their intelligence and give them exactly only the information that they need in order to flawlessly execute the test case. That is an amazing, amazing goal to shoot for, and you will reap enormous benefits. But it is a real tight rope to walk, and it's hard to find the rope first, and then it's harder to walk on it. But it takes practice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for making that clear.
Yeah.
So, Michael, let's just kind of go into the next topic of test coverage. Tell
Okay.
us what is test coverage, and what have you seen? What do you do in your practice?
Well, test coverage is how much of the software are you touching with a given test? And then all of the tests stacked up together, how much of the system are they touching overall? Works out to be some kind of a percentage. You see this a lot with unit testing, where you're able to detect which lines of code were executed. It's a little bit different for higher level testing, like what we are talking about with standard QA. A lot of companies, what I've seen in practice is a minimum threshold. You have to have at least 85% of the code covered, of the systems have 85% coverage on there. I've seen some companies shoot for 100%, and then it's that's probably a different discussion altogether. It ends up not working super well when they're going after 100%. I'm going to maybe piss off some people with this, but
Do
you
so.
seem like awesome. Yeah. Now you heard it here, folks, that he gave me permission. He gave me license. I don't actually go for a percentage. Believe it or not. I have found over the years that it ends up being a really deceptive metric. And if you, let's say, for example, you achieve 85% code coverage, that's great. But if the bug is in that remaining 15% and it gets to the customer, guess what?
You're screwed.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the coverage metric, anything that I'm talking about, if I'm referring to coverage, I'm looking more at, like, functionally, what is this thing supposed to do? I'm not looking at how much code it's touching. I don't even care how much code it's touching. I want to know, of the features that the customers expect this software to do, how much of it is working. And then goes back to the test plan and the test strategy and the test cases in order to suss out those details. But I don't use percentages for stuff like that. You measure that with your heart, son. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, you got to be scientific about it, but it's just measuring the right things. It's measuring the features instead of, like, how many lines of code.
Yeah. We talked about unit testing a little bit. You brought it up. So can you kind of double click on that? What is unit testing and why is it important? How does it fit into the whole testing cycle?
Oh, sure thing. So whenever you're writing a piece of software, and you can think of just something as simple as a hello world program or something that takes in just an input off the command line or whatever. A unit test is, hey, we're going to write a separate piece of software that exercises that little section of code, that little small subsection or a class or a method or whatever. But you feed data in, you expect data out. They're very, very small. They're very easy to make. They're quick. And if you're doing unit testing right, you should have lots and lots and lots of these. And they should be the very first tests that you run. They're automated. And if any of them fail, then you've isolated where the likely problem is. And then you can go in and fix it really quick. But unit tests are supposed to be quote unquote the foundation of any kind of automated testing at all.
There you go. So I want to talk more about it. So the audience who is listening to this, Fritz, they understand. They've heard in different meetings, if they're a new BA or a Scrum Master or a product owner, they're new. They hear this word. Oh, we need to have unit tests in place to have automation. How does that connect? Kind of make it real, like help us visualize that.
So they're saying they need to have unit testing in order to have automation at all, like test automation?
No, that comes up. So how does that tie in?
Oh, well, it ties into just getting that fast feedback. They're starting to cultivate that. We need to know right now how bad the software is. And so we're going to start with unit testing. It starts with that mindset of, okay, I just wrote some code. Now I want to be sure that what I wrote actually works. And if I make a change somewhere else later on and it breaks this part of the code, I want to know right away.
Sure. You're saying that, so you're writing that for that unit. You're testing the line or that unit of code that you just wrote.
Right. Yes. But as a side effect of that, if you make a change elsewhere in the code and you don't realize it, but this code that you wrote the test for a couple weeks ago is downstream of that and it breaks, then that's a bug that I left in the system that I didn't know about. So it's a way for you to kind of like go back and fix up the old code to work with the new code, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So let's just talk about what are other different kinds of testing. What comes to your mind, or what do you follow?
Well, there's a lot of functional testing. That's the cornerstone of any kind of test. You want to make sure that it functions according to what the customers expect. But beyond that, there's performance testing. Like how fast does the code respond? How fast does this web service serve up a request? And then you can take a different direction with performance testing and say, let's do load testing. It works great when it's 1 or 2 users, but what if it's 2 million? How many realistic scenarios can we put into the system and have it still stay up? Last thing you want is somebody crashing your system because, well, we're doing so good that we can't sell product anymore because our site's down, kind of thing. It's embarrassing. Stress testing is another one. Sometimes you can just throw all kinds of random garbage at the system and see, okay, some of this stuff's going to make it crash, but will it fail gracefully or will it just boom, blow its brains out, right?
What's the difference between stress and load? Is it kind of similar?
It's similar in terms of how much activity you're getting the system, but load testing is we're going to come up with some reasonable looking personas. We're going to act like a buyer, for example, or act like an indecisive person. I'm going to put this into the cart. Now I'm going to take it out. I don't want to put it back in, that kind of thing. These are things that happen in real life.
Yeah.
Stress testing is you just open up like dev random and just spray the system down and see what happens. It's not clean. It is not clean testing, but it finds things that people don't think of.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for elaborating on that. Let's go into defect management. So what's your mindset and practices around like managing defects and around the topic of defect management?
That's a really good topic. I mean, the mindset I've got about that is you never, ever want to lose sight of a defect. When you think you found a defect or a bug, you basically have to paint that thing until, everybody knows about it and it gets fixed really quick. If you find a bug and you write some information down on a sticky note, I mean, that's going to get lost or a custodian is going to come toss it someday and then you're going to forget about it until the customer says, what the heck, there's a bug. Any kind of system, and I mean, you can use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet that is visible by everybody in the organization or the team, but log some information about it. And importantly, log where you found it, what the conditions were, how to reproduce the bug, and what you expected the result to be. Kind of going back earlier when I said sometimes you think it's a bug and it's like, actually, it's a misunderstanding. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to do that. It's working as expected, right? It's not a bug. It's a feature, it literally is. But you have to have some way of tracking it and also denote in there, is it still live? Like, is it still in there? This was filed 2 weeks ago and it's not been touched since then. What the heck? And you keep track of what state it's in. If it can't be fixed or if it's been resolved or it's closed or whatever, just make sure to call that out. And there are lots of tools out there that do that sort of thing. But I mean, if you're just starting out, like if somebody's listening and they're like, we don't even have a QA department, like how do you test? Then start with something like, when you find a bug, then how are you going to tell people about it so it can be fixed?
If the team is using Jira, is there anything in Jira that can help you log in defects, or do you just create bugs and put it in your backlog and your sprint backlog?
Yeah, I think there is, and it's been a little bit since I used Jira, but I'm pretty sure that they've got
Yeah,
some robust plugins for stuff like that. I mean, they
sure.
because that's the one where you have the concept of just cards or
Yeah.
event types or whatever, and you can say,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is a bug," right, and then
Yeah,
just move it through. But
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely, that's it's in there.
Yeah. So let's go into another topic here, where we want to talk about how do you improve quality of a product in an agile team. So let's say if a team is iterating, every 2 weeks they have a goal, they produce a product increment, working software. In environment like that, if there's new bugs come in, if the quality is quite not there, what are some things that you would recommend to improve the quality?
Okay, really good question. Really good question. And I'm going to suggest something that I think not a lot of people would turn to first. It's always good to start with an end goal in mind and
Mm-hmm.
then work your way backward. Okay. I'm all
Mm-hmm.
about metrics, I'm all about visibility. The best metric that you can start with is how happy are your customers. Okay. And that happiness comes from how much revenue they're spending on the company.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gaining more customers? Are you losing customers? Are they kind of flatlined? They're kind of plateaued a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, are you getting a lot of calls from them saying, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe your software. What the heck? If there were a competitor, I'd go with them." Right? It's like these are good things. These are good tells to
Mm-hmm.
start with. Are they happy? Do they feel like they're being taken care of? If they
Mm-hmm.
don't, then ask them the question, what can you
Mm-hmm.
do differently? And
Yeah.
then start walking it back. Then you start getting into, okay, how many bugs did we find and what category are they? Are they
Mm-hmm.
critical, urgent, high, low, medium,
Mm-hmm.
minor, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
And then you develop your set of metrics that your ultimate focus is, I want the customer to be happy, but they're going to be happy as a side effect of decreasing the number of bugs, increasing the number of tests, and increasing um, all different other metrics. We don't want the focus to ever be the metrics themselves. We want the focus to be that customer. How happy are they?
Mm-hmm. Got you. Got you. Um, a few other things that came to my mind I wanted to kind of bring up is about environment. So like a lot of new folks who are in tech, they ask me, oh, there's all these environments. I kind of want to know what are different environments, why are why are they there? Um,
You talking about like dev,
Dev,
staging,
test, yeah,
prod?
dev,
Okay,
yeah, test one, test two, like different in large company,
yeah,
they have it set up like that. Why is that? What's the significance of having those environments?
sure. Well, it's really about safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of companies, all the ones I've worked at so far that Arch DevOps has helped serve, they
Mm-hmm.
all have multiple environments. They have it set up differently. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been at places where they've got one dev environment, one staging environment, and then production.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at a place where they have one dev, one QA, one staging, and one production. I've worked where
Mm-hmm.
every developer has their own environment. And as they're working on things, it merges into a staging environment where it all gets to play together. And
Mm-hmm.
then if it passes, then it goes to
Mm-hmm.
production. The reason for that is just safety, right? They
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure first that the code that the developers write is running on a mostly for real system. It's like spun up. Maybe it's a virtual system or something like that.
When you say virtual, it's like not customer facing. It's just for the developers to test.
Right. Everything that's before production is
Yes.
internal. It's not customer facing. Production is like, now it's
Yeah.
between you and God. You can just and
Mm-hmm.
then you're on your own, right? But
Yes.
everything before then, you've still got control of it. You got control of all the data. You've got control of all the powers in your hands, right?
Yeah,
And
you're
and
just trying to validate. Okay, if we send before sending this to 100,000 people, how is this behaving? And that's what you mean by security.
exactly, yes. So try it out on your own machine locally. If it works good, then take that code and put it together with all the other code that's being worked on. That's in the staging or QA environment, whatever you want to call it. But it's a middle environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where developers can get in and try some things. Testers can get in there and try some things. And they've got databases that are feeding information into the software.
Mm-hmm.
Then it looks pretty close to what they're going to see out in the wilds of the production environment. And then if it
Mm-hmm.
survives, if they say, okay, well, we did not find any issues, then we'll just go put it into production. And it's like, and it's scary. Man, there's people, whoever it is that's in charge of hitting that button, they've got balls of steel. I have yet to work in a place that lets people like test in production. It's not as scary as people let on, but
Right.
it's just like, ooh, so scary. Poke. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, talking about that, let's just kind of go into the idea of like continuous deployment, like how to set up automation. So then you're not trying to like be in this fearful environment. Okay, 6 months we haven't released something and now we're going to release and we are very nervous because we haven't released for 6 months. So what's your mindset around, changing the practice so you are, releasing, every week or every few weeks. So you're getting in the habit of pushing code to production in a continuous basis.
Oh, sure. And that's a good question. So, I mean, it really starts with having those environments set up like what we just talked about. Have either one development environment or multiple, like one for every developer. Let them have a place where they can test their stuff out. If it works, put it in the next environment, test more rigorously, and then ship. And then be diligent about shipping even small changes. Okay. That mindset of, hey, we just worked on this one particular thing and let's ship it. Let's not wait. We don't want to wait 6 months. Let's just make a small incremental improvement. It worked on staging. It worked in QA. Let's shove it out. Now the other side to that is you need to have something more than just, hey, we're going to ship it to prod, because sometimes you put it out there and it doesn't work. So you need to be able to roll it back. You have to have a good, solid rollback strategy. And there's some really cool things that you can get into. Have you ever heard of canary testing before?
I've only heard that, but I actually forgot what that means.
Oh, that's cool. Did you actually forget it, or do you just want me to explain it for the listeners?
Please explain that for the listeners.
I'm like, he knows what it is. But if you've got a piece of software that's meant to go out to a lot of different areas, think like a mobile app or a website that has a bunch of different little nodes out there that works uniquely for everybody. Take your software and put it on just a handful of those to start with, and then watch a little bit. Okay. If people start screaming because of it, then take it back and put the old stuff back. Okay. But instead of, angering 100,000 customers, if you minorly inconvenience like 50 of them and then quickly put it back to the way you found it, then right away, okay, well, maybe we ought not have done that. We have a bug. But if it does work, then release it to a few more and a few more and a few more. And when you get really like systematic about it, you can be rolling out multiple releases at the same time. So you got group A that gets release 1 and it works for them. So then you give release 1 to group B, and then you give release 2 to group A. So then you keep staggering it out. And then eventually you've got this constant stream of just yummy value and goodness. And people won't notice that you're making these updates because they'll just notice minor changes. LinkedIn does that a lot. I mean, like last year, every time it seemed like they rolled out some new update, comments would go away. You get a crap load of notifications. I guess they're putting a new feature. Woohoo.
Yeah.
But now they can make like interface changes, and you'll just go on your phone and be like, that
changed. Yeah.
Button's different, and I've got this video capability, and I can do stories now. That's neat.
Yeah.
They're doing that canary testing. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tying this all back to like automation, right? So what is automation testing? How should teams think about it? So kind of educate us on, automating your testing. What does it mean?
Right. Well, earlier on when I said, okay, what's a test? What is
Mm.
the definition of a test? It's
Mm-hmm.
we have a theory that this system is going to work a certain way if we do certain actions to it. You put
Mm-hmm.
A in, you get B out, right?
Mm-hmm.
When that's been proven to be the case multiple times,
Mm-hmm.
and you could easily reproduce that test again and again and again, it's like, okay, it's taking me 5 minutes to run this test.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather write a piece of software that will perform these exact same actions in the exact same order on my behalf,
Mm-hmm.
so that I don't have to sit here like a tool doing this again and again. Like, I can just free up my time to do other things.
Mm.
And that's where the automation mindset starts is, okay, how can I invest some time now so that I can get a return on that time investment later on? And it might take a while, but if it takes you 5 minutes to run a test manually and it takes you 5 hours to automate the test, it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a little bit before you get that return. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're thinking in terms of that return on your time investment, and
Right.
also being strategic about what tests you should automate. You don't have to
Mm-hmm.
automate every single thing,
Mm-hmm.
just the stuff that gets you the answer you're looking for quickly.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
And you talked about, one of those things being people being fearful because they haven't done it, not having expertise. But what are some other like challenges that people kind of run into when they want to transition from manual to automation?
The biggest challenge I've seen, there's this idea that you have to be a developer in order to write automated tests, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be. You absolutely do not have to be. You have to know how to write a little bit of code,
Mm-hmm.
but if you've got that spark, if you've got that desire, there are loads of resources out there that can help get you started. Actually, I've got some.
I
I
was
mean,
gonna
for
say you
listeners,
just launched a course for that, right? So we're gonna
I
add the link in this podcast so
yeah,
people want to check that out.
I did. I wasn't gonna bring it up, but yeah, I did. I launched a course, man, and that's
Yeah.
something that really helps kick things off. But it goes back to that fear. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm just a tester. It's like, nobody's
Mm-hmm.
just anything. You're a person with all kinds of skills, and
Mm-hmm.
you've got amazing powers and gifts at your disposal that maybe you haven't figured out yet. But if you've got that idea of, I really want to learn automation, you absolutely
Mm-hmm.
can.
Yeah.
And it's nowhere near as hard. Like, I tell people, it's like, if you're automating your testing right, it should not be anywhere near as complex
Mm-hmm.
as what a senior dev is writing for
Yeah.
production code, right? It should be easier to do that. If you find
Mm-hmm.
yourself, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm banging my head. It's like, maybe you're
Yeah.
making it too complex, right? Just simplify it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I think just people going through that course that you have, that will be helpful if they want to learn automation testing. And from the business side, what I heard is like, if you invest a little bit up front, if you think through it, if you have a strategy, then you can truly achieve agility. Because if you want to deploy to production every week or every 2 weeks, or if you want to do continuous deployment, you cannot do that without the foundation of having automation testing, or people being ready to do that, right?
Right. Exactly.
um no, that was great, thank you. Yeah, kind of wrapping it up. We talked about testing and a lot of concepts around testing. We talked a little bit more about automated testing in the end. Um, Maybe one last thing I wanted to add is, from a testing perspective, if people hear words like API and microservices, so like let's just kind of talk about those two words, because that actually came as a request. People wanted to learn more about that. From a
Mhm.
testing perspective, what is an API and how does that relate to testing?
Well, an API basically is just a piece of software that communicates to other pieces of similar software.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have like just a standard packet of information that they send. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of times they'll either talk to a database, or they'll serve up a request, or they'll generate web page code so that you see a certain thing on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
When it relates to, now did you ask, how does it relate to testing or automated?
Yeah, like in testing, like how does that, do you test that? Like how do you,
Yeah,
if
you do. It depends on the company. So if a company has a really, if they have a really thick front end, like a lot of the logic is in the front end, then
mm-hmm,
that's where you would test. You test at the website, you test at that level.
mm-hmm,
The websites, by virtue of what they're doing, they hit the API, and you can test the API that way. If you're running a big test and it fails, okay, well, there's probably something in the API that went wrong.
mm-hmm,
If they have a really thin front end layer, if they have a really simple website and all the business logic is in the back end, in the web services, the microservices, the API, that's really how it should be.
mm-hmm.
Um, then that's where you would be testing. And you'd probably use a tool like Postman or REST client or something. SOAP UI is a good one too. And you can do some extent of automation with that as well. But you can also write automation tools for yourself that send and receive packets and say, yep, I got a 200 as a response. Looks good. Ship it. There's all kinds of stuff. But yeah, that is one of the things. It's the same mentality as you would if you were testing a website, but you just don't have nice clicky buttons and text fields and things to mess with. You just got to send raw
Yeah,
payloads back and forth. It's a little bit gross, but it's beautiful in its cleanliness, its simplicity. It's just
yeah,
data.
yeah. No, Michael, this was a great conversation. You actually helped me learn a lot of things, and I'm sure the audience is going to take a lot from this conversation. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. I was honored that you asked me to be on your show. I'm not used to being on the other side of the mic here. I think I forgot how to
Yeah,
be a guest, but I guess I still got it in me. You had fun.
yeah,
You're
yeah. We
laughing.
had a blast. Yeah, thank you so much.
Anytime, man. Take care.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. We'll be sure to come back with more exciting videos on Agile topics.